I found an article describing noteworthy, significant gatherings of Pentecostals, and I began looking for those held in Mishawaka. The two General Assemblies of Pentecostals occurred in the city of Mishawaka. One was September of 1941, much later than the prophet would have visited. By 1941, his wife had already died. The other gathering took place September 17th through 23rd, 1934, shortly after the prophet married Hope. This made me even more confused. 1934 was before Hope contracted tuberculosis, so her illness was not the reason that he did not bring her along. Less than 90 days after his wedding, the prophet went on vacation without his newlywed wife. He described it as a vacation, not as an evangelistic trip or a religious trip of any sort. Why did he need a vacation so soon? I read and reread his life stories again and again. I'd always thought that the trip happened close to the time of Hope's death, and for good reason. When the prophet spoke about his Mishawaka trip, it sounded much different than the historical timeline suggests. He certainly made it sound like it was much later than a few weeks post-wedding. He talked about how hard that he and Hope had scrimped and saved for him to go on the trip, and how little they could afford. How they could not scrape 2 pennies together renting a small 2-room apartment for just $4 a month, furnished with purchases from a junk dealer. How he never took an offering, and she worked at a shirt factory to make ends meet, but somehow saved a few dollars for a trip. It sounded like a cheap fishing trip, not a trip to a lake resort. After learning that he was still holding Pentecostal revivals with Roy Davis at this time, and that he was a Pentecostal evangelist when he stumbled onto the General Assembly of Pentecostals in Mishawaka, I began to wonder, why did he claim to be a Baptist minister at the time? Was this Mishawaka trip actually an evangelism tour with Roy Davis? Did he leave Hope behind because she was not involved with his already established evangelistic ministry? Whatever the reason, the prophet's life story was much different than the facts I'd collected about the historical timeline were beginning to suggest.